These are all of the niches that I sell in other than clothing, ranked in ascending order of how much I personally like selling them. Large electronics, meaning VCRs, Blu-ray players, that kind of stuff, or audio units, the big boxy stuff, stereos, stuff that's hard to ship, it's heavy, there's a lot of fragile components, but it's worth a lot of money. I every once in a while will sell one of these if it's worth more than like 200 bucks. At that point, I will bite the bullet, pay the 15 bucks to source it, and take all of the risk on board of the thing not working, breaking during shipping, having to test it, not having the means to test it, or bringing it home, testing it fully, finding out that it doesn't actually work, and having to bring it back for a return, if they'll even take returns. As you can tell, I'm not really that partial to selling them because of all the issues that I stated, also because they take up a lot of space. If you're a casual seller of these things, I don't think it's necessary to have that kind of expertise cultivated, because it's so easy to just look up the codes, the style codes, the style code, the J. Crew style code on the tag inside the hem of the VCR. Also, understand that it's going to take up a bunch of time to pack it and ship it. Also, if you don't happen to have exactly the right size cardboard box on hand to ship it, you may end up having to dumpster dive for one for a while, or going out and buying one special. Or if you don't have the packing material, all the void fill that's necessary to make sure it doesn't break in the shipping process, that's going to take up more time too. It's just very time consuming. However, you can make hundreds of dollars selling them. Next is cookware, by which I mean specifically pots and pans. There's a handful of brands of cookware that carries a whole lot of value, especially vintage cast iron like Griswold, or enameled cast iron in the really prestige brands, especially Le Creuset. Look up the sales numbers on Le Creuset. If you're not familiar, it's LECRUESET. Right? I hope so. Like large electronics, they take up a hell of a lot of space in your inventory, and they can be a pain to ship also. I like finding little saucepans like this big that I can fit in a regional box, or one of the bigger pots that will go in a flat rate. I don't like taking a bunch of time out of my shipping process to specially pack items unless they're really, really valuable. So if I had a cookware set that sold for like 300 bucks or more, then absolutely I would have no problem packing each little thing individually and finding a big cardboard box and playing Tetris to get everything situated nice and snug. Otherwise, I'm not going to be bothered with it. I used to sell a lot of cookware. I think it's actually an undertapped niche on some level, but it is, like the large electronics, a lot of work. Also, most of the time they require some kind of cleaning, up to and including polishing the brass and copper and silver components. Also, cast iron is surprisingly brittle. You wouldn't anticipate it being so, but it is tricky to ship. Hats. A lot of people consider clothing. There's a couple other categories on this list that people do occasionally categorize as clothing. I don't. I think the listing and shipping process is different enough that I just simply don't count it as clothes. I don't like selling them because they're tough to ship. You have to make boxes for them or have boxes for them. If you just put them in a padded mailer, which I have done before, you run the risk of the rigid structures of the hats getting distorted in the shipping process. This includes not just ball caps, but other kinds of hats, not including these beanies, which are very simple and easy to ship. There is money in it, especially vintage caps, if you know what you're looking for, but I just can't be bothered with the time and the hassle. Above hats is shoes. Another one that a lot of people consider clothing. I do not. They're more like a hard good than they are like clothing. I have sold hundreds and hundreds of pairs of shoes over the years, so I speak from experience when I say that it just is a time-consuming niche, and it's something that will definitely pay off for you if you focus in on it. I personally far prefer clothing to shoes. Opinions vary wildly on this, and shoes are most clothing resellers' #1 side niche or supplemental niche or secondary niche. This is very, very common to see people selling clothes as well as shoes, to the point where people are occasionally confused by the fact that I don't sell them. It's just what I said. They're more like hard goods than they are like clothing, and it's the prepping, listing, and shipping process that is different enough from clothing that I have to have some kind of motivation to go out of my way to do it in the form of really exceptionally high margins to bother with it at this point. Most shoes you have to clean before you list because they will have scum on them. They'll have prices sharpied on the soles. They will require polishing and prepping if they're leather dress shoes. It's an interruption to my listing flow to take the photos. It's a different process. Again, more like a hard good, and the shipping can be tricky. You can ship out in the priority shoe box. You can use flat rate boxes. If you get creative, you can bubble wrap them. You can probably get away with shipping them pirate ship. I've heard of people using the cardboard flat rate mailers to sell them or to ship them. It's, again, just more complication that I want to routinely deal with. If I find the right pair of shoes, let's say I find a pair of Yves Saint Laurent sneakers, which is something that I've done before because I'm so cool, or if I find like the right pair of Allen Edmonds that are worth 150 bucks. At that point, yes, I'm willing to go through it. It's not a huge cross to bear. It's just personally annoying to me at this point. So the right pair of shoes, yes, I will still source it. I will still sell it. I do not at this point go out of my way to look at the shoes unless I am bored. Fishing gear, I really like selling. I especially like selling new fishing lures and fishing reels, new or used. Unfortunately, you just don't find them that often. If I found them more reliably, this would be one of my top niches because the demand is really, really, really healthy and it's perennially healthy. Anglers are very keyed in on their gear, which is a blessing and a curse. Blessing in that the demand is so high and you can get really good money, really healthy margins, even on kind of slightly less desirable, slightly older gear. Curse because they're not going to get rid of the stuff unless they have to, and they all know the value of it. So it's very rare to find a big windfall of fishing reels and rods and lures, especially at a thrift store. Garage sales are a different case. You may be able to get lucky. But again, most anglers know what they have and they're gonna want competitive prices for it. They might cut you a deal if you find a really, like I've gotten a $300 rod used off of a fishing forum locally for 100 bucks, and that was a sweetie deal. That was the guy being really, really nice to me. You're just not gonna find $300 rods or reels for below 50 bucks unless you know someone personally and they're doing you a favor. But when you can find it, it's good to pick up if it's the right thing. Just like the large electronics, you don't necessarily need specialist knowledge when it comes to fishing reels and peripheral gear because it's easily looked up. It will have codes on it. Fishing lures are a different story. Maybe try Google Lens. Some of the vintage lures are worth a ton of money. If you find it new in packaging and you can get it for less than $1, I would say it's probably pretty safe. This one is kind of a catch-all category. I'm just gonna call it textile ephemera. Neckties, scarves, pocket squares, bandanas, tote bags, clothing adjacent textile goods that I source at the bins every once in a while. I like them because they fit right into my listing process for clothing and it costs next to nothing when you get it at the bins. And you can find stuff that has some okay margins. Like I found a really lightweight kind of diaphanous Free People tote bag that I flipped for 15 bucks. I got it essentially for free because it weighed about an ounce. Neckties you can accumulate over the course of many bins trips, put them in lots and sell them. Every once in a while I'll cherry pick them at thrift stores. Again, like shoes, I source them if I get bored or if there's something really eye-catching that catches my attention. It's just a nice little spice to sprinkle on top of the clothing sales. There are people that have expertise in this. I'm not one of them. CDs, by which I mean music CDs, I don't really focus on this at all, but every once in a while you'll find a CD that you can source for really cheap that is rare and worth money. There are a lot of collectors of CDs. There are a lot of audiophiles that prefer having their music on hard copy. I am among them because I have reached my mid-30s and it is time to become that guy. And there's a lot of CDs that are not readily available on streaming services, or people want the memorabilia, they want the physical artifact. This is something that is hard to give general guidelines on because it breaks down by CD. They are scannable. You can use the eBay scanner to look up barcodes. You can punch them in by hand. And every once in a while, you find a big home run. Another good that you can accumulate into lots and then sell off. Like if you find a whole bunch of U2 CDs and you get them all for 10 cents each, you put them up in a lot on eBay for like 30 bucks or something, that can be a good flip. Also, CDs qualify for media mail, which means your shipping is dirt cheap. Media mail is the cheapest that I know of that you can ship anything USPS. They are a little bit of a pain to ship if they have a jewel case. I like just making a really basic cardboard sleeve, taping it, and then putting it in a bubble mailer. That has never caused a problem for me. VHS tapes are basically exactly everything that I said about CDs. There are niches of VHS tape to definitely be more on your radar. Obscure science fiction and horror movies, especially horror movies, can be worth a lot. There's a lot of also-ran movies that have cult followings that were never ported to DVD or Blu-ray, are not available streaming. You can only get them on VHS. There are all kinds of collectible VHS tapes. I just sold one for 30 bucks that was an obscure claymation movie from the 90s that involved Frank Zappa. You can find stuff like this every once in a while. I sold a VHS tape that was a promotional tape for a defunct Star Trek The Next Generation ride at Universal Studios for like 50 bucks. I got it for 50 cents or something at a thrift store. It was an undertapped market. People know about it now. The big deal, the hyped up part of VHS tapes that everybody on YouTube talks about is the new factory sealed tapes of popular movies. I have a friend who sold a sealed copy of the original Beetlejuice for I think over $1,000. It was some crazy huge profit. So that's possible. One downside of VHS is if you don't have a TV with a VCR hooked up to it, it can be, well, it is impossible to test them. So you have to list them as untested, which I do all the time. I just say not tested, don't have the means to test it. I'm offering free returns in case there's a playback issue, and then offer free returns. Small electronics can be great to pick up. This covers a whole lot. I've sold a lot of vapes. I've sold a lot of industrial electronics like weird testers, voltometers, battery chargers. Famously, TV remotes can be a good niche. CD players, Walkmen, old audio recorders, vintage little Sony things, little doodads, stuff that you find at garage sales, stuff that you can find at swap meets that flies under the radar. You can look it up and you will be amazed at how much money some of these will go for. And they're fairly easy to store and ship. Number 3, video games. This is a lot of people's number 1. The demand for video games is generally very strong. There are a huge proportion of video games that have strong demand and carry their value. A great thing to find at garage sales. Not something that you find all of that reliably at thrift stores, which is why it is lower on the list than the next two. It's also a little bit lower because, again, like VHS tapes, I don't have the means to test them. And I get the impression that video game buyers want the video games to be tested. When I do run across them, I pick them up, I sell them, you just stuff them in a padded mailer, and off they go. They don't qualify for media mail, unfortunately. Most of them will ship first class. Shipping is still reasonable. But you can get 40, 50, 100 bucks sometimes for the right games. And if you source them in the right places, you can get them for real cheap. I cannot reliably source them. The competition is unreal. You're not just competing with resellers. You're competing with everybody under the age of 65. There are experts who just resell video games. They snipe stuff from garage sales. They have personal contacts. They go to video game shops. They look for underpriced stuff, or pawn shops, and they do the same. They haggle. They buy in big lots. They scour swap meets. You can do it if you want. I think the competition's crazy. Number 2 is DVDs and Blu-rays. You wouldn't expect DVDs to carry all that much value, and most of them do not. but the DVD market is healthier than you would think. I've found Blu-rays for $3 or $4 at Goodwills that sold for $75 and up. It's the more obscure stuff. It's the obscure movies. I've had great luck with extreme sports movies, like skate movies, snowboarding, BMX, musicals, live concert DVDs, foreign DVDs that are scarce here, Criterion Collection, the stuff that you don't see every day. And I like DVDs because it is possible to develop an eye. And you don't have to train that hard for it either. I mean, if you've been alive for a while, you've probably familiarized yourself with a whole lot of well-known popular movies. And you can weed those out. If you find a DVD of Knocked Up, it's gonna be worth like $3 online. If you find some weird Ingmar Bergman film in a 3-disc set for $1, you could probably flip that for like 25, $30 on eBay. DVDs also qualify for media mail. I've been selling a lot of these lately. I found a rare DVD of a documentary about text-based RPG games from the 80s and 90s that I flipped for like $75, and it flipped really quick. Here's a DVD that's going out soon. I flipped it for $15. I acquired it for 50 cents. It's a swimming DVD, instructional swimming DVD. There's all kinds of stuff like this. And it's nice because a lot of them have barcodes, which means that you can just scan it in the eBay app. You can also scan them on Amazon. You're probably gonna be gated from selling them on Amazon, but you can use Amazon to look the stuff up quickly. My #1 favorite niche to supplement my clothing sales with, I bet you can't possibly guess what it is, given certain context clues in this framing of this video. It is books. I really, really like selling books. I think Blu-rays and DVDs are probably more reliable sellers and easier, kind of more beginner-friendly of a niche, as well as video games. I just happen to love books, and I also happen to have an eye for them. I love selling books on eBay. I used to sell them on Amazon. At this point, I'm perfectly happy just to sell them on eBay. I don't bother with Amazon anymore. I'll give you some book categories to look out for. #1, and I've said this a few times on the channel, is these kinds of genre property tie-in novels. This is an Unreal Tournament book that I picked up at a bookstore for $3 that I will be able to flip for around 50 probably. It's quite rare, it's vintage, there aren't a lot of them floating around. There are Magic the Gathering books, Dungeons and Dragons books, Warhammer is a great example that will hold a lot of value, more value than you think. You can also lot them up. They're readily available. They're usually very cheap. So even at overpriced Goodwills locally, I can still find books priced at a flat rate of like $1 to $3, depending on what it is. The downside is there are a lot of potential condition issues. You do have to know what you're talking about to some degree when you list them. Or the more you know, the more terminology you know in terms of book selling, the better you will do. I'm of the personal opinion that selling books, selling that kind of a book on eBay, the highly collectible book versus Amazon, gives you a little bit of an advantage because you can take more photos of the books. So I can show these from every angle. I can put up 10 photos of this, which you can do on Amazon. Most people don't. Also, I can give detailed condition notes, which I would do on Amazon as well, but that's not people's expectations, I don't think, on Amazon. And when you do that, it recommends you above the standard bookseller who is probably just using a condition template in their description. They're probably not describing it at all because they don't know the terminology, or they're too lazy to do it and they justify it as, well, I'm working too much volume, I can't possibly take the time to actually give detailed condition notes. They definitely get away with it. And what I'm talking about is like if you're looking at a book and it says may include markings, highlighting, wear, spine issues, it's your dice to roll, basically. Do you feel lucky? As someone who buys used books online, I can't stand it. It pisses me off. It reads as lazy. I don't know what I'm getting. And if someone can show me a book in clear detail visually and describe it with the terminology that I'm looking for so I know exactly what I'm getting, I'm much more willing to pay up for a book, even 2 or 3 times more sometimes than for someone who's just using the thumbnail template that's built into eBay and is saying, good, it's good. Thanks, man. That's my little sermon. You don't need to supplement clothing with another niche. If you just want to focus in on one thing, there are plenty of people that do that. I think it is advantageous to have these floating around in the back of your mind while you source, because it's good to not let the really low-hanging fruit slip through your teeth. It's good to be able to just spot these things to take advantage of them as you can. If I find the right pair of shoes floating around and I don't happen to have been looking for them, but they pop out at me and I can make an extra 70 bucks, sure, why not? Also, it's good if you just simply, like I said, get bored of sourcing clothing. It's nice to be able to take a break and go scan through the CDs or the DVDs and still be able to find money. Also, if you happen to be shopping for these things because you like them, you can oftentimes find stuff to pay for whatever it is you happen to be buying for yourself, which is how I shop for books. I thrift the majority of the books that I buy, and I will buy a whole bunch of them, and then I'll find 1 or 2 that will cover the cost, so I wind up getting functionally free books after a little bit of work. There is virtually infinity niches that you can sell in. Anything that is a commodity has a market for it online. Everything from bottle caps up to cars and refrigerators. So this is just my history with these niches, and this is the stuff that I've settled on as kind of my comfort zone and my preferences, which is all this is. It's just preference. So hope that helps. Hope you got something useful out of it. Appreciate you watching.